Welcome to the Drowsy Historian. Tonight, we descend deep beneath the surface of medieval life, into a place where light barely reached, and names were forgotten long before bones turned to dust. In this quiet journey through stone and shadow, we'll explore why you wouldn't last a day in a medieval dungeon, not just for the darkness or the chains, but for what time and silence do to the soul. So lie back, close your eyes, and let the past unfold softly around you. This is not a story of heroes. It's a story of echoes, and you are safe to drift among them. Chapter 1, The Descent Below. You never see it coming. Not really. One day you're walking freely under a gray sky, boots crunching gravel outside a stone keep. And the next, you're being dragged toward a shadow that smells like rot and old blood. Your arms are tied behind your back. The rope is damp. The guards don't speak. And though you're surrounded by the noise of medieval life, of horses and haggling merchants and blacksmiths pounding steel, those sounds seem to fade the closer you get to the entrance of the dungeon. It's not a gate. There's no grandeur or iron portcullis. It's just a hole in the ground, covered by wood and shadow, a place people pretend doesn't exist. The first thing you notice as you're shoved down the stairs is the temperature. The air grows colder with every step, but it isn't a fresh cold. It's damp, wet with centuries of decay. The walls start to glisten with moisture. Moss clings to the sides, and the narrow staircase curves downward with no end in sight. No one speaks. You don't know how far below the earth you're going, only that you've left the world of living behind. One step, then another. Then the door closes behind you. There's no torch in your hand, just a flickering one ahead, held by someone whose face you'll never see clearly. You breathe shallowly, because the smell down here isn't something you want inside your lungs. It's not just human waste or the stink of rot, it's something older, like the scent of despair soaked into stone. You step in water. No, not water. Something sticky. And the man behind you chuckles. He's seen it before. You haven't. Dungeons in medieval Europe weren't as common as films might suggest. In many cases, there weren't even official prisons. But when you were dragged into one of these few hellish places, you knew you were no longer considered a human being. The word dungeon itself comes from the Latin dominus, meaning master. These were never built for justice. They were built for control. Your cell isn't really a room. It's more like a hole carved into rock. The door is wood and iron, the kind that's already rusting but still heavy enough to crush a man's foot. They don't throw you in. They let you walk in, slowly. The cell smells worse than a tunnel. The ground is dirt soaked in fluids you try not to imagine. There's no straw, no blanket, no corner that isn't stained or soaring. You try to find a place to sit where nothing touches your back. They shut the door, and with that, the silence becomes alive. You hear things, distant clinks of metal, a moan, scratching. Somewhere nearby, you wonder if it's an animal. But it isn't. Someone is just awake in another cell. Maybe they've been awake for days, or years. You're not sure what time it is. You won't know again. There's no sun down here. No light unless it's brought. And light costs something. Some medieval dungeons had no doors at all, just shafts in the ground. Oubliettes, they were called. The French word oublier means to forget. Prisoners were dropped into holes and literally forgotten. No trial, no meals. Just dropped in a pit and left until they stopped screaming. Sometimes, guards would lift the iron grate and find only bones. That is, if they remembered to look. You try to breathe through your mouth, but even that brings the taste of the air into your throat. You swallow nothing. Then again, your eyes adjust. You see outlines. There's a mark on the wall. At first, you think it's a stain, but it's not. Someone carved something there, not word scratches. 4 lines and a 5th crossing them, a tally. Someone counted days or weeks or maybe just meals, but the lines don't go on for long. The carving ends, and you wonder if they did too. There's a bucket in the corner. You hope it's for water. It's not. It's for everything else. You look down and realize your hands are still tied. You yell for someone. No one answers. Then you hear something breathing. In the next cell, it's slow, rasping, and it sounds human, but not fully. A lot of people assume torture was constant in medieval dungeons, but the truth is, for most, the silence was worse. It was the waiting, the nothingness. You might not be whipped on day one. You might not be whipped at all. Instead, you'd sit for hours, days, sometimes years. And that's what unravels a man. Not the pain, but the empty time. Some scribes recorded prisoners going mad simply from the dripping of water. Drip, drip, for days, for weeks. Each sound a hammer. You start to think of the sun, of bread, of touch. But every time you try to remember, your thoughts are swallowed by the chill around you. You don't know if you'll survive the night. But even if you do, the part of you that matters won't, because down here, in this forgotten chamber under the keep, time doesn't pass. It devours. Your eyes close, not from sleep, but from surrender. And somewhere faintly, you hear a voice, a whisper. Or maybe you don't, maybe you imagined it. That's what the dungeon does best. It makes you doubt everything: light, sound, and even yourself. There's no sound at first, only the weight of stillness. Your knees ache from the damp floor, your back from the cold stone. Hours have passed, or maybe it's only been minutes. Time does not behave normally down here. It stretches, bends, curls in on itself. You count your heartbeats just to pass the time, but even that rhythm feels distorted, as though your own body is unsure if it still belongs to you. You hear a noise again, metal, scraping against stone. It's not in your cell. It's close. Someone being moved. Someone arriving. The thought of another prisoner, perhaps newer than you, briefly stirs a strange feeling. Not hope, just the idea that you are not alone in this grave. But that feeling disappears as quickly as it comes. If someone else has arrived, it only means more fear, more eyes in the dark, more coughing. More rats? You try to stretch your legs. The room is too small. You slide along the wall, feeling the slimy stones against your side. Your fingers brush something soft. You jerk back. It's not a rat. It's cloth, wet, cold, and stiff with age. A prisoner's garment, abandoned, or worse, forgotten on someone who never moved again. You don't look, you don't want to know. Not yet. There's a small barred hole in the upper corner of your cell. It's too high to reach. Even if you stood, it would offer no view, just blackness. These holes weren't made to give light. They were made to let in the occasional whiff of air, or to carry the sounds of torture further down the halls. In many medieval dungeons, acoustics were intentionally cruel. Screams could be heard clearly, echoing along the stones, reminding each prisoner what might come next. It wasn't an accident. It was part of the design. Your stomach growls, not with hunger, but with emptiness. You haven't eaten since morning, at least you think it was morning. When you arrived, you still believed you'd get a trial. Maybe even a visit. That illusion begins to fade now. You remember hearing that some prisoners were held for years without a single charge. All it took was the wrong insult, the wrong rumor, the wrong debt. Once you were inside, your name began to vanish. There's another sound to drip this time. One, then another. At first, you think it's water, but the smell tells you otherwise. It's coming from the wall behind you, a slow seepage of something old. Maybe the room above is a cesspit, or maybe it's just the natural decay of this place. Many medieval dungeons were built beneath latrines, not out of neglect, but as punishment. Prisoners would live, breathe, and sometimes drown in the waste of the very people who imprisoned them. You've heard the stories. You never believed them until now. You try to sleep, you close your eyes and curl into yourself. The ground is wet beneath you, and your muscles twitch with every sound. Sleep is impossible, yet exhaustion presses heavily. Your head nods, then snaps up again. You fear that if you let go, something will crawl on you. Or someone. Eventually sleep wins. It's not peaceful. It's not deep. But it's an escape. Brief, broken, and full of noise. You dream of open skies and running water, of a table filled with bread, of clean clothes, of voices that call your name kindly. But then the dream twists. The voices become sharp. The bread turns to ash. And the sky darkens to stone again. You wake up with a gasp. Someone is watching you. You can't see them, but you feel it. A presence near the bars, breathing softly. Your eyes adjust again, but the dark is too thick. You crawl backward until your spine touches the wall. Silence? Whoever it was, they're gone, or they were never there. You don't know what's worse, being watched, or imagining that you are. Not far from here, in dungeons beneath castles like Warwick and Edinburgh, there were reports of secret chambers. Rooms behind walls, spaces so tight a man could not stand. Some were bricked up with people inside, not to kill them, just to forget them. Sometimes, years later, workers would find bones in the stone, curled up in corners where the air never reached. You begin to cry, you don't mean to. The tears come without warning, silent and hot, cutting down your face and vanishing into the stone beneath you. You don't cry for justice. You stop believing in that. You cry because your body still remembers what freedom felt like. And now, even that memory is beginning to fade. Somewhere deep in the dungeon, someone laughs. Not a guard. A prisoner. It's the kind of laugh that no longer knows its meaning. Hollow, cracked, tired of screaming. You listen to it until it fades. And when it does, you realize you were holding your breath. You let it go. Slowly, carefully. Because in a place like this, even a breath must be rationed. You lie back down. You turn away from the barred door. You curl inward, as far as your limbs will allow. And for the first time, you understand the truth. It's not the beatings or starvation that breaks a prisoner. It's the waiting, the silence, the not knowing. Tomorrow may bring food, or chains, or nothing. But one thing is certain. You are here, and you're not getting out. Chapter 2. The air that suffocates. When you wake, the air feels thicker than before. It clings to your skin, seeps into your mouth, and settles in your lungs like wet wool. Breathing isn't difficult yet, but it's noticeable. Every inhale feels like swallowing rot. You sit up slowly, aching in places you didn't know could ache, and look around again. The darkness is complete, save for a faint glow through the bars, far down the corridor. Someone has a torch, but it's not near you. You are still alone. No one tells you what time it is in a dungeon. Time has no shape here. There's no bell to mark the hour, no priest to call the morning prayer, no sun to cast light and shadow. There's only the breath in your chest and the silence pressing in. If you're lucky, you might hear the distant clank of metal as someone is moved, or the faint creak of wood above people living lives far beyond your reach. You try not to breathe too deeply, but the body resists. It demands air, and this air is not fit for life. The scent is layered. First, there's the earthy mildew of the wall's wet limestone, coated in centuries of mold. Then, a heavier smell. Feces, both human and animal. Somewhere nearby, someone has lost control of their bowels. It's not unusual. The dungeon doesn't offer privacy. People rot together here. There is no dignity in defecation. Buckets overflow, and when they do, the waste simply spreads. Sometimes it drips into lower cells, seeps into cracks, or is tracked by guards with no care. Above all, this is the coppery tang of blood, old and new. Not enough to flood the senses, but always there. Like rust in the air, it mixes with the faint scent of smoke remnants from the torchlight, or perhaps from the chamber where punishments are dealt. The combination is sickening. But your body adapts. Slowly, reluctantly, your senses dull. Dungeons were not ventilated. Architects in the medieval world never considered airflow for prisoners. The goal wasn't health, it was containment. Some cells were so far underground, air only entered through a single grate high above. And even that was often blocked by dirt, snow, or the waste from those above. In winter, the air grew sharp with frost. In summer, it became putrid, a thick, warm stew of filth and breath. It was not uncommon for prisoners to suffocate during heat waves. Their bodies discovered slumped against the wall, blue-lipped and wide-eyed, with no wounds but the invisible one airlessness. You cough, not hard, but enough to echo. It startles you. The sound feels foreign in your throat. You wonder how long it will take before your lungs rebel. The dampness in the air carries more than odor. It carries illness. The most common diseases in dungeons weren't dramatic, they were slow. Tuberculosis, bronchitis, fungal infections that filled the throat or nose. Some prisoners died not from wounds, but from mold that bloomed in their lungs like moss on stone. Someone nearby is wheezing. It's rhythmic, like a broken bellows. You can't see them, but the sound is close enough to feel. You picture them hunched, wrapped in rags, spitting blood against the wall with each breath. You try to block it out. You press your fingers against your ears, but nothing stops it. You imagine that might be your future. Or maybe your mirror. There's no one to complain to. No physician will descend into the pit. In the rare event a healer is summoned, it's not to cure, it's to document, to confirm that someone has died. And even then, it's rare. Bodies are often left to rot, their decay absorbed by the stone and the air, layer after invisible layer, so that every breath you take is someone else's final exhale. Somewhere in the far corner of your cell, moisture drips steadily from the ceiling. It has carved a groove into the stone below, evidence of time and neglect. You crawl toward it, hoping for water. Your throat feels dry, cracked. You haven't drunk since you arrived. But when you touch the stone, it's slick with something green. Not water. Slime? You pull your hand back, disgusted, lick it, and you risk disease. Ignore it, and your thirst will grow. These are your choices now. You crawl back to the center and curl up again. You try to think of something clean. A meadow, perhaps. A bath, but even your memories feel coated in grime. It's hard to remember what fresh air smelled like. Was it grass or baking bread? You're not sure. Already, the dungeon is replacing your senses, rewriting your instincts, and that is what terrifies you most. The next breath you take is deliberate. You force yourself to pretend it's fresh. You imagine trees, wind, open skies. But then someone coughs again, and the fantasy collapses. You are here, and this air is not for living. It is for waiting, for fading, for forgetting. You try not to move. Every shift of your body releases a new scent into the stale chamber. Something below your hip is damp and slimy. You tell yourself it's just moss. But in your mind, you know better. Everything in here decays. Fabric, flesh, hope. You turn your face away from the wall, only to catch a draft of something sharp and sour old vomit, perhaps. It could be days old, or hours. There is no way to tell. The longer you stay, the more your body betrays you. Your head aches from the constant dampness. Your nose runs, but there's nothing to catch it. Your eyes itch, irritated by mold spores swirling in the air. Every breath burns slightly, like the smoke from a distant fire, but no flames are near. Just the lingering smoke of torches and the slow rot of centuries. You start to hear the dungeon itself. The stones shift faintly with temperature. Water seeps behind walls. Sometimes you can hear the faint murmur of people walking above, distant footsteps filtered through layers of wood and soil. But those sounds come and go, leaving you with something worse than noise your body makes when you're trying to be silent. The growl of your stomach, the creak of bones, the sudden, sharp buzz of a fly. It lands somewhere near your face, attracted to the salt of your skin. You slap it away, but it returns. Insects thrive here. Lice, fleas, and flies feed on filth and prisoners alike. Many dungeons were filled with vermin not by accident, but by design. Lice infestations are so common that guards carried powdered lime to treat their own clothes after entering. Some prisoners would scratch their skin, raw in the dark, convinced something was burrowing beneath. In certain cases, they were right. There are written accounts of people pulling maggots from wounds only to find more the next day. Infection was not a possibility. It was a certainty. You start coughing again, this time deeper. Your throat feels raw. The air has thickened since morning, or what you assume was morning. There's no torchlight now. Just the press of dampness, a blanket of rot that settles over everything. You lean your head back and stare upward, though there's nothing to see. The ceiling is so low you can touch it with your fingertips. It's slick, cold. A single droplet falls on your forehead. You flinch. It's warm. You think of the stories now? The ones you heard when you were free? Of prisoners locked underground for decades? Of noblemen thrown into cells and forgotten when the power shifted? You used to doubt those tales. You thought they were meant to scare children. Now you know they were warnings. Quiet ones. Easily ignored until you're the one behind the door. A noise breaks your thoughts. A dragging sound. Slow, heavy. It moves along the corridor, past the iron doors. You freeze, breath held tight in your throat. The sound pauses, then resumes. It's not footsteps. It's something being pulled. Maybe a sack. Maybe a person. It reaches your door and stops. You don't move. You don't make a sound. Then it continues, slowly fading into the distance. You let out a breath you didn't realize you'd held for nearly a minute. That's how the dungeon works. It plays with fear like a musician, with a lute plucking one string at a time until your mind vibrates with tension. There are no screams here today. No torturer's laughter. Just the quiet grind of time and terror. You crave sound, yet fear it. You crave light, yet know it brings no rescue. You remember that in some castles, the dungeon wasn't just a room. It was the water cistern. Prisoners were locked beneath grates, where waste and rain pooled. Some were submerged ankle deep. Others neck deep. Guards would throw food into the water. If you were hungry, you dove. If not, you waited, starving until hunger overcame disgust. There's no such cistern here, but the memory of those tailies makes you shiver just the same. You curl back onto the stone, wrapping your arms around yourself. Your clothes are still damp. The fabric clings to your back. Your skin itches where it touched the mold. You try to scratch, but your nails are brittle already. One splits. You don't cry out. Pain is expected here. It almost comforts you now. Your lips are dry. You lick them and taste salt. Your body is dehydrating. And still, no one comes. The silence is unbroken. The hallway dead. You wonder how many other prisoners lie just beyond the next walls. Are they sleeping? Are they watching? Some may be dead already. The air wouldn't change. No one would notice. The idea strikes you suddenly. What if you are already dead? And this is the punishment. The thought lingers longer than it should. You shake it off. But not completely. It waits in the corner of your mind, whispering, another drip, another buzz, another deep choking breath. You pull your knees to your chest and close your eyes again. You tell yourself this is only one day. Just one day. But you know better. Time in the dungeon doesn't move forward. It coils inward, and if you stay long enough, you'll forget what air ever felt like outside these walls. You hear the clink before you feel the pull. Iron rings scraping over stone, echoing off the damp walls, sending a shiver across your skin. It's not loud, not aggressive. It's slow, measured, as though someone is preparing something old, heavy, and cruel. And then you see them. The shackles. The jailer doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He opens the cell door with a screech and tosses the chains at your feet. They hit the ground with a dead thud, still warm from another body. He points, and you understand, these aren't for decoration. They're the next part of your sentence. You move cautiously, limbs trembling from cold and lack of rest. Your wrists slide into the cuffs with reluctant obedience. The iron is rough, gritty, and far too tight. There's no cushioning, no leather lining, just metal against skin. The kind that cuts slowly, invisibly, until infection begins. The chains clink again as he secures them. Then he leaves. Just like that. No explanation, no purpose. You are now attached to the wall by 3 feet of rusted iron. In many dungeons, restraint wasn't used for escape prevention. There was nowhere to run. It was about humiliation, control, dehumanization. Some prisoners were shackled standing, others seated. Some had their arms suspended above them, forcing them to sleep upright. Limbs would swell after hours, then days, and in some cases dislocate from the strain. This wasn't accidental. It was part of the design. You try to lie down, but the chain pulls taut. You roll onto your side. The metal grinds into your wrist. You adjust again. It's no use. Every position presses something against something else. You curl inward, accepting the pain, because it is now the only familiar feeling. Time continues to warp. You listen for clues of movement outside your cell, but there is nothing. Just dripping water and the soft rattle of your own chain when you breathe too hard. You remember hearing as a child that prisoners could go mad from being chained too long? You thought it was just exaggeration. Now you understand the truth. The chain becomes a whisper, a constant reminder. You are not free, not even within your own body. You shift your weight again, and the cuff slices a layer of skin from your wrist. It stings briefly, but you already know the wound won't heal. Not here, not in this air. You pull back and see the blood trickle down your arm, dark in the shadows. You press it against your shirt, hoping to clot it. But the fabric is filthy, already soaked in grime. The wound will fester. Some medieval records speak of prisoners who were never unshackled, not even in death. When they died, the chains remained, rusted to bone. Skeletons have been uncovered beneath ruined castles, still wrapped in iron, sometimes with wrists fused to cuffs by decay and corrosion. The jailers had no reason to remove them. The chain was more permanent than the person. Your mind begins to wander. You try to remember the feel of movement, of walking freely, of stretching your arms above your head, of touching another human being without restriction. But the memory feels distant, like something you read in a book or heard in a dream. This chain has rewritten your posture. It defines your limits. You move within its radius again and again, like a tethered animal pacing a circle into the ground. You sleep in bursts now, never more than a few minutes. Each time you drift, the weight of the chain reminds you where you are. Your arms twitch, you wake, you curl up again. You wake again, there's no peace here. Only pauses between suffering. You feel the weight in your chest begin to shift, not from fear, but from rage. You wonder who made these chains, who shaped them on the anvil, hammered them until they glowed, cooled them in a barrel, then fastened them to human wrists for centuries. Did they feel proud? Were they paid? Did they know what these would do, not to the body, but to the mind? And still, these chains aren't the worst part. The worst is that you're starting to accept them. They become normal, expected. You stop pulling against them. You start calculating how to sleep without reopening the same wound. You learn how to use the bucket without spilling. You adjust your breathing so the chain doesn't rattle in your sleep. You begin to think less of escape and more about endurance. Then comes a voice, not the jailer, not a scream. Just a soft, tired voice from the next cell, a whisper, barely audible. You press your head against the wall and hear it again. It's not calling for help, it's praying. Slowly, in Latin, the same sentence, over and over. You recognize the words. A confession? Someone nearby is preparing to die. You close your eyes. Not to sleep, but to shut out the world. But you can't. The chain tugs again and the whisper continues. The iron, the stone, the darkness, these are your companions now. And they do not let go. You lose track of how long you've been tethered. The days are shapeless, not because of the dark, but because nothing changes. You wake, move a little within the arc allowed by your chain, then wait. Sometimes you sleep. Sometimes you hallucinate. But mostly you just endure. The skin on your wrist is raw now. The iron cuff rubs against the same patch of skin every time you adjust your position. At first it bled, then scabbed. Then the scab broke and bled again. You no longer flinch. Pain has dulled. It doesn't go away, but it becomes part of the rhythm. A constant drumbeat in the background of your thoughts. At some point, you feel your legs begin to swell. You look down and see the mottled color creeping up from your ankles. The lack of movement is catching up to you. The body isn't built to be still for this long. Your muscles ache from disuse. Your joints pop strangely when you shift. You try to stretch one leg and feel a sudden cramp seize your calf. You bite your lip to stop from screaming. The chain clinks against the wall, then stills. The silence afterward is worse than the cramp. Some prisoners were kept chained so long their limbs shriveled. Historical records from 13th century prisons in England describe inmates whose legs became permanently bent from being shackled in place. Some were found unable to walk after release. Others had the bones in their wrists reshaped by years of compression. The cuffs acting like a blacksmith mold, only far slower and crueler. You think of movement now as a luxury, You remember walking through markets, lifting a mug of ale, reaching for a friend's shoulder. Simple things, small gestures, all of them stolen by a single iron ring. You try to shift your weight again, but the chain snaps taut and holds you still. You growl under your breath, not out of pain, but frustration. Anger is one of the few feelings that still comes clearly. It hasn't been softened by the dark. There's a sound in the hallway keys, not near your door, just far enough to ignite your attention, then footsteps. You listen. You hope they stop near you. A strange thought that even a guard's cruelty might be welcome, because it would mean contact. But the steps pass. You are still forgotten. In medieval dungeons, it wasn't uncommon for prisoners to be left completely alone for weeks. Jailers might die, change shifts, be replaced, or simply forget who had been assigned to which cell. Paperwork was inconsistent. Names were often written once and never again. If a jailer disliked you, he might throw your record into the fire. You would vanish, even though you still breathed. You return your attention to the iron cuff. You begin to wonder how many people wore it before you. You run your fingers across its edge and feel the nicks and dents. You imagine each one marking a past occupant, some attempt to pry it open, some twitch of desperation. You try to picture their faces, but all you see are your own hands trembling as they brush the corroded rim. You begin to pick at the rust, slowly, absent-mindedly. It flakes beneath your fingernail, orange, black, brown layers of decay that mirror the flesh beneath. You don't expect escape. You're not foolish. But the act of peeling away something, anything, feels like resistance. Like a whisper of control. Somewhere down the corridor, someone coughs violently. The sound echoes, bouncing off the walls and reaching you like a threat. It's wet, ragged. You picture blood on stone. You hear them spit, then silence. They do not cough again. You go still. You stare at the stones across from you. The candle wax trails, the moss, the single scratch, carved like a letter or a symbol. You don't know what it means. You imagine it meant something to someone. That someone else, long ago, sat exactly where you are, staring at that same mark, breathing the same air. And just like that, your sense of identity begins to slip. Not your name, though that too feels distant, but your shape. Yourself. You are no longer a person. You are a figure chained to a wall, surrounded by stone. You are part of the dungeon now. You start whispering to yourself, not words, just sounds. Your voice has become unfamiliar, raspy and soft. You repeat the noise just to remember what speech feels like. You close your eyes and try to remember faces, family, friends, a lover's touch. But the images are flat. They fade quickly. You are left with only the cold and the constant pressure of iron. In the quiet, your thoughts shift to the jailer. You haven't seen him in what feels like days, maybe longer. You begin to wonder what he does between visits. Does he eat meals with his family? Does he sleep above ground, with a fire near his bed? Does he ever think about the souls beneath his feet? In 14th century castle records, some jailers were known to live lavishly while prisoners starved. There were even reports of jailers selling extra rations or clean water to the families of inmates. Others were cruel for sport. A few, however, broke rules and offered tiny kindnesses. Bread, conversation, clean bandages. Those men often disappeared. Mercy was rarely rewarded in the dungeon. You close your eyes again. The pressure on your wrist drops. You whisper once more. A prayer? A curse? You're not sure. It doesn't matter. The chain stays where it is. It doesn't care what you say, it only listens. And waits. Chapter 4. The silence screams. It is not the chains that break you, not the darkness, or even the pain. It is the silence. Not quiet, but deep pulsing, suffocating silence that grows like mold inside your thoughts. At first, it is merely unsettling. Then it becomes loud, then unbearable. You sit in the same spot, knees to your chest, head bowed. The cuff on your wrist has stopped bleeding, but the wound beneath has turned soft and tender. You do not touch it anymore. Your fingers stay clasped together like you're still in prayer. Not because you believe anything will change, but because the position feels familiar, like something from your former life that the dungeon hasn't yet erased. There's no sound in your corridor now. No footsteps. No rats. No coughing. Just the whisper of your own breathing and the quiet thump of your heart. You try to slow your pulse to listen more clearly, but what is there to hear? A drip that has long since dried up. A faint breeze that doesn't reach your skin. You think about making a noise just to break the stillness. A knock against the wall. A word? But you don't, because the silence might answer. Many prisoners described hallucinations after only a few days in absolute quiet. They heard music, voices, entire conversations. Some spoke to people who weren't there or saw faces glowing from stone. In the dungeons of northern Italy, jailers reported finding inmates weeping with joy over imaginary visitors. Others were discovered chanting nonsense to walls they believed were sacred. One man carved letters into the stone for years, convinced he was writing scripture passed down by angels. Your silence is not filled with angels. It is filled with absence. The absence of footsteps, of food, of time, of comfort. You lie on your side and trace patterns into the dirt with your fingertip. You draw a square, then a circle, then something that looks like a house. You wonder why. Maybe it's your mind reaching for structure, something clean, something real. But then the scratching sound begins. It's faint, irregular. At first you think it's in your cell. You freeze. You listen. It comes again. Not a rat. Not metal. Something softer. Fingers. You hold your breath and crawl toward the wall. The sound is coming from the other side. Someone is scratching the wall between your cells. You don't speak. You tap twice, gently. The sound stops. You wait, pulse racing, then 3 taps in return. You pull back, hand shaking. You don't know if it's a greeting, a warning, or something else. You whisper, "Who are you?" But receive no reply. Just silence again, thicker than before. A kind that presses in on your chest and makes you feel small. You lie back down, more alert now. That scratching has reawakened something in you fear. The next few hours stretch like wax under heat. Your thoughts melt, reform, melt again. You try to recite prayers but forget the words halfway through. You whisper names you once knew. Mother, the name of your horse, the man who owed you coin, but none of them feel real. You repeat them anyway, like mantras, hoping that saying them will keep your mind from slipping. Then you start to hum. Not a song you remember, just a sound, low and steady. The vibrations soothe you at first. Then it grows louder in your own ears. The echo bounces back from the stone. You hear your own hum overlapping itself. You stop. The echo doesn't. For a moment, it continues. Then silence again. That's when the fear truly settles. You begin to believe there is something else in here with you. Something that mimics sound, or waits for it. You crawl to the far corner of your cell and curl up. You try not to move. You try not to think. But your thoughts move without your permission now. They loop. They cycle. A priest once wrote that silence is the devil's tool in prison, not violence, not temptation, but silence. Because it turns your own mind against you. It reminds you of every mistake, every moment you wished undone. And then it convinces you that none of it ever mattered. You begin to feel watched. There's no reason for it, no sound, no movement. Just the undeniable feeling that something sees you, not with eyes, but with presence. You close your own eyes, but the feeling grows. You try to tell yourself it's the dungeon itself, that the stones are alive, that this place has memory. You want it to be true, because the alternative that it's your mind unraveling is worse. You open your eyes again and find that you've moved. You're sitting upright, though you don't remember doing so. Your fingers are clenched. Your legs are shaking. You hear the chain rattle softly and realize you've been grinding your teeth. The silence has made you twitch like an animal sensing a predator it cannot see. You press your forehead against the cold wall. It grounds you. For a second you think you hear something footsteps above, or the flutter of a bird, but it's just your pulse in your ears. The silence has stolen sound and replaced it with lies. You whisper again, not to anyone, just to yourself. Words without meaning, a name from a dream, a half-remembered verse. The only way to resist the silence is to make noise. Even nonsense, even madness. Because if you let the silence win, you'll never hear anything real again. Chapter 5. The rat feasts. You hear it before you see it. A faint scratch, barely louder than a breath. Then another. Then a tiny shuffle of something soft brushing against stone. You don't open your eyes. You know what it is. You've heard enough stories. And now the stories are inside your cell. The rat. At first, it only watches. You can feel it near your foot, hovering just outside your vision. You move slightly, and it scurries, but it doesn't run far. It knows your chain length. It knows you won't reach. It waits just beyond your movement, brave in ways no man could be. Patient, hungry. You never thought you'd fear something so small. But in the dungeon, rats are not minor pests. They are kings. They move where they wish, eat what they want, sleep where they please. They fear nothing. Not disease, not filth, not iron or torch. And they thrive on death. You sit up slowly, bones aching from the cold. Your breath escapes in short puffs. The rat makes no effort to hide now. You see its shape skitter toward the bucket and the corner, sniffing, searching. When it finds nothing, it turns toward you. There's no fear in its eyes, just awareness. You wonder if it's seen men die here, if it's fed on them, if it will feed on you. Historical records from medieval France describe rats swarming corpses before they could be removed. Some dungeons had populations so large that guards refused to enter alone. In certain cities, the rats were said to understand the jailer's routine appearing minutes before feeding time, circling the gates in anticipation. One chronicler noted that a man's body, left unattended for 3 hours, was found gnawed beyond recognition. Another described prisoners who intentionally smeared blood on another cell wall to redirect the rats elsewhere. The rat climbs the stones along the edge of your cell, using tiny footholds you never noticed. It pauses near a damp patch and begins to chew. You try to shoo it with your foot, but the chain tightens early. The rat doesn't flinch. It stares. You lock eyes with it and realize something chilling. It doesn't see you as a threat. It sees you as part of the dungeon. Just another warm, immobile object that might one day feed it. You wrap your arms tighter around yourself. The floor is colder than before, or maybe your body is simply losing heat. The rat disappears into the corner. You hear a rustle, then silence. You wait, you listen, nothing. Then you feel it. A soft pressure near your hip, a tiny weight. You jerk upright, but the movement is limited. The rat runs off again, tail trailing behind like a whip. You check your side. There's a tear in your tunic, a new one. You didn't hear it rip. The rat was testing. It was close enough to touch you. Close enough to bite. You remember stories too many to count of rats targeting wounds. The scent of blood draws them. In London's Newgate prison, it was reported that injured prisoners had to stay awake all night, slapping and kicking to prevent rats from chewing on open sores. Some failed. The infections that followed were worse than the bite. Flesh would blacken, then stink. Sometimes the smell drew more rats. You crawl to a new spot, though there is no safety here. Just stone slightly colder than the last. You breathe slowly and try to ignore the scratching that's now returned. You try to sleep, but every flicker of sound brings panic. A pebble falls. A squeak. The sudden thump of something you can't see. You know you won't rest? Not tonight. You think again of how far you've fallen. There was a time you would scream at a rat in the pantry, slam it with a broom, curse its filth. Now you plead with it silently not to come near. You respect its intelligence. You fear its hunger. You feel in the back of your mind that it's only a matter of time before it tests you again, closer, longer, more confident. In some dungeons, rats were not only tolerated, but encouraged. Jailer logs from Bruges described cases where meat was rubbed on the floor of a rebellious prisoner's cell. Then the door sealed. By morning, the man was in shock from bites. He confessed everything he had once refused to admit. That story, told quietly among guards, became a kind of unofficial tactic. Not tortured by blade or fire, but by fur and teeth. You wonder if the jailer left food scraps nearby, or if he stopped feeding the rats altogether, forcing them to return to their original source. You don't want to believe it. But then again, belief has no place here. The dungeon does not care what you think, only what you bleed. You close your eyes and pull your legs to your chest again. You make yourself smaller, less exposed, less tempting. You press your face into your arm, covering your neck, where the skin is softest. You stay still. The scratching continues. You are no longer sure when the silence began. You try to recall the last full sentence you heard, but nothing comes. The dungeon has erased sound so completely that your own voice now feels foreign. When you do speak whispers, fragments, names that mean nothing, the noise falls flat, absorbed by the walls. There's no echo, no acknowledgement, just stone and space and stillness. The silence is not passive. It watches, it waits, and it changes you. You begin to narrate your thoughts aloud, not because you need to, but because the presence of your voice confirms you are still real. You tell yourself what you are doing, sitting, breathing, moving left, now right. At first, the sound comforts you. Then, it disturbs you. The voice is yours, but it doesn't sound right. It's too slow, too hollow, as if it's been filtered through the dungeon itself. In medieval accounts, jailers often described the silence of prisoners as more frightening than their screams. One 14th century warden wrote that inmates who had gone silent were closer to ghosts than men. He claimed their eyes changed, that their gaze seemed to float past you as though they had already stepped into another world. You begin to understand what he meant. There is a strange awareness that grows inside you when no one speaks to you for days. Your memories become louder. Not the way they used to appear nostalgic, comforting, but jagged and intrusive. A moment of laughter from your childhood slams into a vision of your mother's death. A taste of bread suddenly curdles with the imagined scent of blood. Emotions no longer separate neatly. Love bleeds into guilt, joy into dread. And worst of all, memory itself begins to feel like hallucination. You try to remind yourself of facts, where you were born, what year it is, how old you are, but each answer feels uncertain. You remember your name, then doubt it. You say it aloud and flinch. The sound doesn't fit in this place. It doesn't belong. You start to think maybe you don't either. At some point, you begin to pace. The chain limits you, but you find a rhythm. 3 steps to the left. Stop. 3 steps to the right. Stop. It becomes a ritual. Something to fill time, to give shape to the void. You whisper numbers with each step. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Again, you do this for hours or minutes. It blurs, and then something shifts. You hear a sound. You freeze, startled. It was faint, not metal, not voices. Something softer. Breathing. You strain your ears and hold still, heart pounding. Nothing. You wait. Still nothing. You whisper, "Is someone there?" No response. You step back. The silence feels heavier now, like it's angry you interrupted it. You lie back down, pressing your back to the wall. You close your eyes and try to sleep. But sleep doesn't come. Only images. The walls moving inward. The ceiling dripping blood. Your own limbs cracking open like dry branches. Prisoners across Europe often wrote about these visions in journals that survived their release. A man locked in the Chateau d'If described a night where he became convinced the stone beneath him was growing teeth. A woman in the Tower of London claimed to see the ghost of her sister every time she blinked. Another, in Avignon, scratched poems into the wall, only to later admit he no longer understood the language he wrote them in. You haven't seen anything yet, but you've started to feel something watching. It's not from outside the cell. It's inside you, a presence in the back of your mind, quiet but constant, as if a second self has woken up, one that lives in silence, one that doesn't sleep. The worst part is how normal it starts to feel. You sit in the dark and imagine what the jailer's voice would sound like if he returned. You imagine the scrape of his boots. You imagine him tossing bread onto the floor. You tell yourself you hate him, but you long for him, because his presence would mean sound, proof that the world hasn't ended. You begin to suspect that time has stopped, that the dungeon exists outside of the hours and minutes you once understood. Maybe the world above is gone. Maybe the sun has been extinguished. Maybe you are the last person left. That thought should terrify you. It doesn't. You close your eyes again, and this time you whisper to the silence itself. You win, and somewhere deep within the stone, it smiles. At some point, the scratching stops. Not because the rats are gone, but because they no longer need to sneak. They have become part of the dungeon's rhythm, like the dripping water, the creaking timber, the occasional clink of distant chains. They move with quiet confidence, knowing no one will stop them. You've stopped trying. You have grown used to their presence, even learned their patterns. They feed at night, sleep in cracks during the day, and wait for weakness. Tonight, they are bold. You feel them again, soft feet padding near your legs, the brush of fur against your ankle. One moves closer to the wall and begins to dig into a crevice you hadn't noticed. Bits of plaster flake off with every scratch. They're not just foraging now. They're nesting, building homes, multiplying. You try to remember the last time you moved freely. It's been days. The chain is your limit. You sleep on one side now, the one without the worst wounds, the one least likely to attract attention. You breathe shallow, trying not to draw them closer with the heat of your breath. You hear them climbing over something soft. You don't turn to see what it is. Maybe it's your bedding. Maybe it's not. A sudden squeal cuts through the dark. It's high-pitched, desperate. A fight? You sit up, startled. Something scrambles toward the bars, then away. You hear more squeaks, then silence, then chewing. You close your eyes again. In the Tower of London during the 1500s, there were reports of prisoners writing their final messages in blood on the walls. Not for the sake of history, but to prove they once lived. One message was found decades later, partially scratched out by rodents nesting in the crevices. The man's name was lost. Only a single line remained. They came at night. You now understand what he meant. It wasn't the noise that haunted him. It was the inevitability. The realization that once injured or asleep, he could be reduced to a meal. You begin to speak again, not out of hope, but desperation. You whisper names, fragments of prayers, lines from old poems. Anything to remind yourself you are still human, still separate from the creatures circling you. Your voice is hoarse, but the sound comforts you. You speak louder. One rat pauses. Another stares. You don't stop. Then you hear it, the jailer's footsteps. Far off, heavy, deliberate. For a moment, everything else disappears. Even the rats freeze. You scramble toward the bars, fingers extended, iron cutting into your skin. You call out, not loudly. Just enough to be heard. The footsteps approach, echoing along the corridor. You see the shadow of a torch flicker across the damp stones. You call again. He walks past. You scream, just once. A sound bounces down the corridor. No reply, no pause, but torchlight fades. The silence returns. One rat climbs into your bucket. You don't move. Another scurries across your leg. Still, you remain still. The fire inside you, the anger, the pride, even the fear has dimmed. The scream was your last offering. It was ignored. You sit back slowly, carefully. The rats resume their movement. One begins to chew at your shoe. You let it. It's easier that way. The moment you resist, they return stronger, smarter. The only power you have left is stillness. You are learning that in the dungeon, stillness is survival. There were dungeons, particularly in Central Europe, where guards recorded the number of rats per cell, at times outnumbering prisoners 5-1. They knew the infestations were deadly, but they also knew they were useful. Rats softened prisoners, broke them down long before the whip. No guard needed to raise a hand. Just withhold food, water, or rest, and let the dungeon do the rest. You try to think about something clean again. A stream in spring, a feeling of grass. You remember your dog. A memory flashes, his bark echoing against a stone wall. Was it a real memory? You don't know. The rat chews louder. You cover your ears. You curl back into the corner, chin tucked to your chest. You begin to count in your head, numbers whispered between breaths. Counting helps. It's a wall against the dark. You make it to 50 before losing track. You start again. There is no rescue, no dawn, but there's breath. And for now, that's enough. The rat pauses at your heel and bites. Chapter 6. The Torture Room. You don't remember how long you've been here when the door finally opens. It's not loud. It doesn't creak or slam. Just a click. The chain tightens suddenly, tugged by a guard's hand. You react with surprise, pain shooting through your wrist as you're dragged forward without warning. The light from the corridor floods your cell, burning your eyes after so many days in darkness. You squint, blink, try to adjust, but it's no use. All you see is shadow and movement. Two figures, silent, armored, but not heavily. They don't speak to you. They don't even look directly at you. They hoist you up and march you forward, the chain pulled taut, as if guiding an animal. Your legs tremble, barely holding your weight. You stumble once, and a boot presses against your back to push you onward. You don't resist. There's no strength for that now. You're led through narrow stone corridors that spiral deeper into the earth. The walls sweat, and the air becomes heavier with each step. The light from their torches dances across the uneven floor, revealing streaks of old blood. You don't need to be told where you're going. You already know. This is the path no one returns from. The torture chamber. When you enter, you smell it first. Burned hair, singed flesh, a strange metallic scent that sticks in the throat. The air is warm, unnaturally so. There are no windows, no vents. Just a square room with a low ceiling and stone walls stained darker in some places you can't look at for long. Tools hang from wooden pegs along the far wall. Some are familiar. Hammers, pliers, blades. Others are not. Curved metal bars, leather straps, devices with teeth. The torturer stands by the table. He doesn't wear armor. No mask, no hood, just a plain tunic and gloves. His face is ordinary quiet, thoughtful, not cruel, not angry. He looks at you like a craftsman studying his next piece of work. You are not a person to him. You are a process, a task. Torture in medieval Europe wasn't just punishment. It was a method, a strategy, a way to extract confession, real or false. In some courts, a confession under torture was considered the gold standard of truth. But those who survived often admitted anything to stop the pain. They would name their own brothers, confess to crimes they didn't understand, swear to sins they never imagined. The dungeon didn't care if the words were true, only that they were said. You're told to sit. You don't question it. You're too afraid. The torturer gestures to a bench with cuffs bolted into the sides. You hesitate, and a guard forces you down. Your wrists are bound again, this time tighter. Your legs too. You are no longer in control of your limbs. He stares straight ahead, breathing fast. The torturer approaches slowly, his hands behind his back. He says nothing at first, just studies your face. He lifts your chin, examines your eyes, then he speaks, softly, almost kindly. Why are you here? You try to answer. You don't know. You stammer something your name, maybe. He nods once, as though he expected confusion. He turns away and walks to the wall of tools. The first device he picks up is simple, a screw press. You've heard of it before, but never seen one. He explains what it does not to terrify you, but to keep things clear. This will crush your fingers, he says, bone by bone. Then he sets it down and picks up something else. A pear-shaped metal object with a twisting mechanism. He holds it carefully. This is used for mouths, or elsewhere, but only if you lie. You realize then that the silence of the dungeon was a mercy, because now every sound cuts like a knife, the clink of metal, the scrape of wood, the slow grind of gears turning, and through it all, your own heartbeat thundering in your ears. He starts with your hand. The press clamps down slowly, not fast, not like a hammer. It begins with pressure enough to notice, then enough to hurt, then enough to scream. You try to stay silent. You fail. The first knuckle gives way with a sickening crunch. You cry out. He nods. He records something on parchment. You don't know what. He loosens the press. Your hand throbs. Blood pools beneath your fingernail. You can't unclench your fist, but you know it's not over. He asks another question. A name. You don't recognize it. You say so. The press returns. Another finger, another turn, another break. You scream again. It goes on like this for what feels like hours. Time dissolves between each question. Your body trembles, sweat mixing with blood, the pain becoming a haze that clouds your thoughts. You try to answer every question honestly, but he accuses you of lying, not angrily, just matter of fact. Then the pain returns. This is the rhythm of the chamber. Question, pain, silence, repeat. In some parts of Europe, torturers were highly respected. Paid well, trained formally. They kept logs, practiced techniques, and followed procedure. They were not monsters. They were bureaucrats. Their job was to transform people into answers. And now you're being transformed. By the time they unstrap you, you're barely conscious. Your hands are ruined, your limbs useless. You are dragged back to your cell and dropped like a sack of meat. The door slams shut. You don't move, you can. All you feel is the echo of pain. And the memory of the torturer's voice. Calm, professional, like someone who might one day visit again. You lie still. There's no energy left to cry, no breath left to moan. Your hands feel like sacks of fire. Each finger is pulsing, each joint screaming with invisible flames that flicker through your nerves and bite into your bones. You can't unclench them, you can't flex them. The skin over your knuckles is split, raw, and oozing. Blood cakes beneath your nails. Some are bent. Some may be broken off entirely. You don't look. The cell is dark again. There's no torchlight now. No sounds beyond the usual. The occasional rat, the soft drip from above. The ever-present silence that settles like fog after a storm. But even that quiet has changed. It is no longer the dread-filled stillness of the unknown. Now it is simply emptiness. A void inside and out. You try to remember how you got back here. You recall being unstrapped. You remember a boot on your shoulder pushing you toward the hallway. Your legs didn't work. You stumbled. Someone caught your collar and yanked you upright. Then darkness. Then stone. And now this motionless, breathless pain. In some castles, after a session in the torture room, prisoners weren't healed or cleaned. They were discarded, tossed back into their holes like broken tools. There are accounts of men left without food for days afterward, as punishment for not confessing quickly enough. Others were chained upright to keep pressure on fresh wounds. The assumption was simple. If the body broke before the will, it was the fault of the prisoner, not the torturer. You shift slightly, and your shoulder scrapes against the wall. The sudden motion sends a wave of agony through your wrist. You gasp and immediately regret it. Your ribs ache too. Maybe cracked, maybe bruised. The pain is layered, now skin, bone, muscle, mind. There's a bitter taste in your mouth, like iron. You don't know if it's blood or something else. Your lips are cracked. You run your tongue over them and find flakes of dried skin. You realize you haven't drunk water since before the torture. The thirst is sharp now, but overshadowed by the throbbing in your hands. You look down in the dark. You try to see the damage. There is only blackness. You raise one hand slightly. It flops at the wrist like a dead weight. You feel sick. You close your eyes again. You start to imagine conversations, your voice and someone else's. A friend, a family member, someone from before. You speak quietly, asking questions you never asked in life. You imagine their answers warm and forgiving. You try to live in that memory, but it slips. The pain pulls you back. In the dungeons of Eastern Europe, some prisoners lost their voices after torture. Not from injury to the throat, but because they forgot how to speak. After days or weeks of screaming, then silence, their minds refused to form words. Some never recovered their speech. They were released years later, mute, hollow-eyed, walking with hands they kept hidden under rags. You wonder if that will happen to you. If your hands will heal, if you'll ever write again, hold anything again. The thought breaks something deeper than bone. You begin to cry, quietly, not out of fear or pain, but out of loss. You've lost more than flesh. You've lost your place in the world outside. No one will shake these hands again. The door creaks open. Your eyes fly wide. You recoil as best you can, pushing yourself against the corner, trying to protect your broken arms. A shadow stands in the doorway. For a moment, you think it's him again, the torturer, returned for another round. But it's not. It's a jailer. He doesn't speak. He tosses something toward you. It lands with a soft. You wait. When he leaves, you crawl forward and find a crust of bread. Dry, molded, you don't care. You bite, chew, swallow. The taste is foul, but it's something. A minute later, a clay mug slides into your cell. You crawl again, shaking. Inside, there's water, stale, slightly cloudy, but not poisoned. You drink it in 3 gulps. You lean back, exhausted from that simple act. You're not grateful, just less desperate. That's the most you can ask for now. There were dungeons where torture wasn't a separate event, it was routine, part of life. Some prisoners were tortured once a week, like clockwork, to see if they'd remember something new. Others were promised relief if they turned in names. The names didn't have to be real. Any name would do, as long as it bought time. You think about that now. Would you name someone? A stranger? A friend? Would you lie to make the pain stop? You don't know. And that not knowing terrifies you more than the pain. You curl into yourself again. You listen to the rats. You listen to your breath. You close your eyes and wait. You don't know if the worst is over. You only know it will return. Chapter 7. Hunger is the enemy. Hunger creeps in slowly, like a chill that starts in the fingertips and spreads until it wraps around your bones. It doesn't arrive as agony, not at first. It begins as a faint hollowness, a quiet void in your belly that gnaws gently. Then it deepens, stretching through your ribs, settling behind your eyes, fogging your thoughts like mist rolling in over a moor. You lie on your side, the thin crust of bread from earlier now a memory. Your stomach growls, but there's no one to hear it, no one to care. The rats, perhaps, they've stopped watching you. You suspect they've decided you're not dead enough yet, but you can feel their anticipation. They know, they always know. The cold in your body has sharpened. Hunger turns warmth into a luxury. Your limbs feel colder now, your breath thinner. Your skin is tight over your ribs. You rub your hands along your arms for warmth, but the motion hurts. The wounds from the torture haven't scabbed properly. They never do in this air. The bandages, if you had any, would rot faster than they could heal. You whisper to yourself again. Just a single word this time. Food. In medieval dungeons, food wasn't guaranteed. Some prisons allotted rations based on social class or the whim of the jailer. Nobles might receive bread, broth, even meat. The poor received what was left, usually nothing. If a prisoner had family with coin, they could send food in secret, but even that was rare. More often, meals were inconsistent, moldy, and insufficient. Your mind begins to drift. You start imagining meals from your past. Not feasts, just ordinary things. A bowl of porridge. A boiled egg. A heel of bread slathered in lard. The smell of onions cooking. The sizzle of fat. You can see it all. Taste it, almost. Your tongue moves against your teeth as if chewing invisible food. Then the image fades, replaced by the gnawing ache in your gut. It twists now. You shift position. That makes it worse. The movement stirs the emptiness, wakes it. You double over slightly, arms wrapped tight around your belly. You whisper the word again, food. But the stones do not answer. The jailer hasn't come today. Or maybe he has, and you missed him. You have no way of telling. Time is a concept that hunger swallows whole. It doesn't matter what hour it is. All that matters is that your body is eating itself. You remember stories of prisoners who gnawed on their own sleeves. Some chewed their boots. One tale you once dismissed as ridiculous now returns with chilling clarity. A man in a Roman dungeon who ate pieces of the straw he slept on, softening it with spit and swallowing it bit by bit. It didn't save him. It only prolonged the agony. Your body aches for distraction. You try to count. You hum softly. You name fruits aloud. Apple, plum, fig, turnip, leek. But the words do not help. They make it worse. You imagine the texture of each food, the way it would feel on your tongue. The sound of chewing. The simple act of swallowing. You wonder how long a person can survive without food. 3 days? 5? A week? You've heard stories of monks fasting for weeks, but they had purpose, faith, perhaps warmth and water. You got none of those? Only the dungeon. Only the chill. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the clarity. Hunger sharpens the mind at first, stripping away everything unnecessary. You begin to see things differently. The rats look slower. The jailer's gait, when he passes, seems oddly timed, as though you could predict it. Even your dreams become vivid, almost lucid. You see the world with terrible precision. But that clarity fades. It's already fading. Your thoughts loop. You can't remember the start of the sentence you just whispered. You forget why you moved. Your breath shortens not from effort, but confusion. Hunger begins to take pieces of you, tiny ones at first. A word, a memory, a plan, then bigger ones. In a Hungarian dungeon, a priest once kept a journal in his mind after being denied pen and ink. He recited it daily, reordering the lines each night. After 12 days without food, he forgot a stanza. On the 13th, he forgot his own name. By the time he was released, he remembered only 2 words. I prayed. You begin to feel dizzy now. Your head presses against the wall, seeking something solid. You close your eyes, but even the darkness wobbles. The room seems to spin. You feel heavier and lighter all at once, as though floating just outside your body. You begin to talk to the stones. Not out of madness, not yet. You speak softly, gently. As if the wall were a child or an old friend. You tell it how you feel. You ask it questions. You pause, waiting for answers. The wall does not speak, but it listens, and for now that is enough. Your belly has stopped groaning. The sharp cramps that once bent you forward have dulled. Now, there's only a hollow ache, like a ghost curled inside your abdomen. Hunger doesn't scream anymore. It hums, low, deep, constant. You lie flat on the floor, arms at your side, palms open, the chain resting cold against your forearm. There's no strength left to curl up. You've become an offering, limbs stretched and surrendered. You no longer fantasize about food. The images don't come like they used to. No roasted meat, no warm bread, no fragrant stews. Your mind doesn't waste energy on hope. Instead, it replays scenes of eating from memory. A crust of bread dropped in dirt and still eaten. Soup with too much salt. Even bitter roots from a forest path. You remember moments you once despised, meals you barely noticed. Now they are sacred. Each memory is another wound. You hear something in the corridor. Your eyes flutter open, slow and reluctant. A shadow moves past the bars. A guard? The jailer? You can't lift your head to see. You listen carefully. The footfalls are steady, then stop. You hold your breath. A bowl scrapes against stone. Then silence again. You don't move right away. Your body doesn't believe it yet. You blink and stare at the outline near the cell door. A bowl. Small, nothing else. No cup. No voice. Just a gesture. You crawl. It takes longer than you expect. Your limbs shake. You pause twice. Your breath grows short. But eventually you reach the bowl and peer inside. Porridge. Thin. Cold. There's a film on the top, like skin. A few gray lumps. You don't hesitate. You eat with your fingers, scraping the sides, licking them clean. You don't care about taste. There's no taste. Only warmth. But warmth is enough to make you cry. You sob silently as you eat, head bowed, ashamed and relieved. Tears drip into the bowl, mix with the porridge. You finish it all and sit there, fingers resting on the rim, eyes closed. You whisper a thank you. Not to the jailer, not to any god, just to the act itself. A moment. The fact that, for now, your body is not devouring itself. Somewhere in Europe, centuries ago, a chronicler wrote that prisoners often wept harder at the sight of food than during their torture. He described men who kissed a crust of bread as though it were sacred. Others broke into fits of laughter after drinking water. One prisoner, given spoiled meat, ate it while vomiting between bites. He died 3 days later, not from poison, but from overeating too quickly after starvation. You understand that now. Hunger isn't just pain. It is memory. It reshapes who you are. You used to eat for pleasure, for strength, for celebration. Now you eat for survival. And survival has no dignity. Later, when your stomach has settled, you lie back again. The warmth doesn't last. but it softens the edges of your body. You feel sleep pulling at you. But sleep comes with visions. You dream of food again, but this time you are stealing it. From your own family, from a child. You see yourself hiding it under a floorboard. A rat gets to it first. You scream. You wake. The bowl is gone. You don't know when it was taken. You don't remember sleeping, but it's gone now. You check the corner, just to be sure. Then the other corner. Then under your legs. Nothing. You sit still, breathing heavily. The dread returns. You remember the taste. You want it again. You fear it may never come back. That's what hunger does. It doesn't leave when it's fed. It lingers. It waits. It becomes part of you. In some dungeons, jailers used food as negotiation. A slice of cheese for a confession. A meat bone for a betrayal. Records from southern Italy describe prisoners tortured not by iron, but by aroma. Bread baked in the corridor. Roasted meat placed near the cells. The scent drifting in, unreachable. One prisoner tried to eat his own shoes. Another chewed the straw from his bedding until his gums bled. You stare at the spot where the bowl had been. The skin on your hands is dry, cracked, and stained. Your tongue explores the crevices between your teeth, searching for leftover grain. But as nothing, you slump back against the wall, limbs twitching slightly. Your muscles ache, not from strain, but from lack. You are withering softly, silently. And, now that it's not the absence of food that breaks you. It's remembering how good it once tasted. Chapter 8, the mind collapses. The first thing to go is time. You forget what day it is, then you forget what day it was when you arrived. You try to count again using marks on the wall or strokes on the floor, but you lose track. The scratches overlap. Some were made by someone before you, some by you. You can't tell which is which. Next, you forget the names of people you once loved. Not their faces, those stay for now, but their voices begin to fade. You try to picture them speaking to you, calling you by name, but the sound doesn't come. Their mouths move in silence. You find yourself repeating phrases that meant something once. I'm not supposed to be here. It's a mistake. Someone will come. But the meaning behind the words has melted away. They are just shapes now, movements of the lips. Ghosts of protest. The darkness begins to change shape. You start seeing colors where there are none, a faint blue shimmer along the wall, a flicker of gold in the corner. You blink, but the colors don't leave. You tell yourself it's a trick of the eye, lack of light, hunger, fever, but part of you wonders if something else is watching, something not alive but aware. You speak to the stones more often now, not because they answer, but because they listen. You tell them about your dreams, the ones you still remember. A stream, a cottage, a cup of milk warming on the hearth. You describe the sound the cup made when it tipped, the way the milk spilled into the fire. You don't know why this memory returns again and again. You cling to it, as if the sound of the spill might remind you who you were. Medieval records are filled with stories of prisoners who lost their minds after weeks or months in isolation. Some believed they were birds. Others believed they were already dead. One French nobleman, imprisoned for treason, spent his final years convinced he had been swallowed by a serpent. He wrote poems on the walls using his blood, believing they would be read by angels. You haven't written anything yet. You don't have the strength, but you have spoken your thoughts aloud so many times that the words have taken on new meanings. Wall no longer means stone. It means companion. Water doesn't mean drink. It means salvation. Silence is not peace. It's the voice of the dungeon itself. Sometimes you laugh, not because anything is funny, but because laughter is the only sound that isn't pain. You try to remember jokes, but they don't land, so you invent new ones. Jokes about stones that talk, rats that pray, jailers who weep. You laugh harder than you should. The sound bounces around the cell, then fades. Afterward, you sit in shame, embarrassed, even here. Even now, you begin to talk to your past self, the version of you that walked into this place, healthy, proud, certain. You speak aloud, criticizing, pleading, mocking. You thought you were clever. You thought the law would protect you. You didn't see the trap. Your voice trembles, not with anger, but with exhaustion. The conversation becomes one-sided. You speak, no one replies. Eventually, you forget what you look like. You try to imagine your face, but it comes back wrong. Eyes too large. Mouth too narrow. You run your hand along your cheek, but the features feel foreign. You imagine you've changed, become something else. Something the dungeon has made, shaped with silence and hunger and fear. You wonder if others have changed like this. The ones before you, the ones after. You wonder if madness is not a collapse, but a transformation like wood burning into ash. Still matter. Just different. There's no mirror here, only the water in your bucket. When you lean over it and catch a glimpse, you flinch. The face is hollow, lips split, eyes sunken. You look like someone else. You look like someone who would live in the dark. You pull back quickly. In a 5th-10th century Austrian prison, a monk kept records of prisoners whose minds had unraveled. One man believed his cell was shrinking. Another carved religious symbols into his skin. One woman refused to speak for 7 years, then suddenly screamed for 3 straight days before dying. The monk wrote, "The mind, when kept from light and warmth, grows roots into shadow, and then it blooms something else." You fear that bloom is starting within you. You no longer dream in color. At first, when you still remembered warmth, your dreams were rich green fields, blue skies, the glow of a hearth. But now they are gray, dull, pale flickers of light and movement. You see shapes, shadows, fragments of things that once meant something. A spoon, a window, a cat walking across a floor. None of it connects. You wake up more tired than when you fell asleep. The line between dreams and waking has thinned. You've caught yourself talking to people who aren't there. You know they aren't real, but still, it feels good to talk. Sometimes it's a family member. Other times it's a complete stranger. One is an old woman with white hair and blue eyes who sits by your bucket. You don't know where she came from. You've never seen her in real life, but she visits often now. You greet her when she appears. You tell her things. She never replies, but you feel better after she leaves. You've begun to hum again, not songs, but steady tones. You press your back to the wall and hum with your eyes closed. It keeps your mind busy. Sometimes you hear harmonies that aren't there. You imagine a chorus in another cell singing back to you, a deep chant rising from the belly of the dungeon. You know it's false, but you cling to the illusion. It makes the silence less sharp. One night you wake up thinking you're standing. Your eyes are open. Your hands are at your sides. You look down and realize you're lying flat. Your body hasn't moved. But your mind insists you are upright, walking through grass. You felt wind. You saw sky, but none of it is real. You're in the same place you were before on the stone, chained, breathing through your mouth because your nose is too sore to function. You blink once, then again. Reality returns, heavier than before. There's something strange about the stones now. You feel as if they're breathing, not literally not rising and falling, but expanding, contracting. You lean against them and feel a faint pulse. Maybe it's your own heartbeat echoing through your spine. Maybe it's imagination. But sometimes you hear a low rumble, like murmuring voices buried in the walls. You press your ear to the stone and wait. It stops. You pull away. Then it starts again. A report from the medieval prisons of Toledo recorded that prisoners began to believe the walls were listening. Some claimed to hear prayers whispered through the cracks. Others believed that if they spoke into the stone long enough, it would answer. A few lost the ability to speak to people but maintained long conversations with corners and shadows. The jailers didn't interfere. They had learned long ago that silence cured nothing. You no longer know how long you've been here. It might be a week. It might be a month. It might be longer. Time is a fog you've stopped trying to walk through. The body gives up first. Then the memory. Then the name. Your name still lives somewhere inside you, but it's buried, covered by layers of hunger and pain and silence. You tried saying it aloud a few days ago, if it was days ago, and it felt odd. The syllables were unfamiliar. It echoed in the cell like a word from another language. There's a mark on your arm now. You didn't make it. You sure of that? A thin scrape running down your forearm, almost straight, like a cut from a blade or the edge of a nail. You study it in the dim light that leaks in from the hallway. It's red. Fresh. You press on it. It hurts. You don't know where it came from. You wonder what else you've done in your sleep. You feel your thoughts folding inward, like pages closing in a book. You repeat things to hold on to them. Phrases, numbers, names of cities. Some stay. Others slip. You don't fight it anymore. You let them go. And yet, in the middle of it all, a strange calm sets in. You begin to accept the madness, not as a failing, but as a shield. Your mind is protecting you, wrapping itself in delusion to soften the blows. The woman by the bucket, the walls that breathe, the harmony in your cell. All of it helps. You see now that reality was never meant to be survived in a place like this. Only madness makes the dungeon livable. You sit with your back straight now, eyes closed, humming softly. The words come again, nonsense, mostly. But the rhythm is soothing. Your body sways slightly. You smile. Because even though you've lost almost everything, your strength, your clarity, your sense of time, something inside you is still singing. And for now, that is enough. Chapter 9, The Jailer's Game. The door doesn't creak anymore. You've memorized the way it sounds when it opens, the soft clunk of the latch, the scrape of the bolt, the heavy drag of iron hinges grinding against stone. You've heard it enough now to know what follows. Boots. 2 of them thick-soled and deliberate. They move at a pace that is neither hurried nor lazy. Just steady, confident, like the man wearing them has all the time in the world. The jailer, he appears with no warning, no schedule, no pattern. Sometimes he comes twice in a day, sometimes not for 3. Once you thought he had forgotten you entirely, that maybe he died, that maybe you had. But then came the boots and the noise and the flicker of the torch behind him. And the truth returned. He was still here, and so were you. He brings food when he feels like it. Not because you've earned it, not because you begged, but because he decided it was time. One morning, though it may not have been morning, he brought you bread that was still warm. You could smell the flour on it. You devoured it before your hands stopped shaking. The next day, he brought nothing at all. This, you've come to understand, is his game. Power in the dungeon doesn't lie in chains or cells or even the torture room. It lies in choice, and the jailer has it all. He decides who eats, who drinks, who walks, who rots. He can give you light or leave you in the dark for weeks. He can throw a scrap of meat at your feet and then laugh when you hesitate to grab it. He can call you by name if he remembers or not call you anything at all. Some days he speaks. Other days he doesn't. When he does, the words are short, tossed like pebbles into a well. Eat. Stand. Quiet. You listen because you must. His voice carries weight not because it's loud, but because it can vanish. And when it vanishes, so does the little thread that still connects you to the world outside this stone tomb. In 14th century England, jailers were not government officials. They were contractors, men paid by the prisoner's family or by the state to keep them alive. That meant they controlled everything. A prisoner's survival often depended not on their sentence, but on the mood of the man holding the keys. And moods, especially in the dungeon, changed like the weather. You've stopped trying to read him. The jailer is not cruel in the way torturers are. He doesn't shout or spit. He doesn't threaten. He simply acts. Once, he stepped into your cell, sat down on a bench across from you, and stared. For 10 minutes. Maybe more. Then he stood and left without a word. You didn't sleep that night. You wonder what he thinks about, if he thinks at all. If you're a person to him or just part of the dungeon's machinery, a body that must be fed just enough to keep breathing. Or maybe not even that. Maybe you're a nuisance. A chore, like refilling a bucket or relighting a torch. Sometimes he hums a strange tune, low, repetitive, just on the edge of memory. You strain to remember it after he leaves, but it always slips away, like a dream, like a name. One day, he brings a cup of water. You drink too fast and cough, spilling half of it on the floor. He watches you with mild curiosity. Then he turns and walks out. That's the last water you'll see for 2 days. You start to imagine ways to please him. You clean your cell with your hands, you straighten your bedding. You say thank you when he appears, but none of it changes anything. The food remains random, the visits remain cold. You realize slowly that this isn't a test. There's no reward, no punishment, just behavior, arbitrary, detached. This is how the dungeon teaches obedience, not through force, but through futility. You begin to hate him, quietly, deeply. Not the kind of hate that burns with rage, but the kind that seeps into your bones and makes your skin crawl when you hear his steps. You plan conversations with him in your head, accusations, questions, curses. You imagine throwing your bucket at him, spitting in his face, laughing when he falls. But when he returns, you do nothing. You stay silent. You bow your head. You take the bread, because the dungeon has stripped you of your rebellion. And he knows it. You begin to understand that the jailer does not serve law or justice. He serves the dungeon. He is its living voice, its hands and eyes. When he enters, the walls breathe. When he leaves, the silence grows heavier. You learn to listen not for the sound of his boots, but for the pauses between your own breaths. He has a way of appearing just when you believe he never will. One evening, if it was evening, he arrives holding a torch and a sack. You sit upright, cautious. He doesn't speak. He crouches down and reaches into the sack. You tense, expecting food, maybe another crust of bread. But what he pulls out is a rat, dead, stiff, its body bloated, fur slick with damp rot. He tosses it at your feet. You recoil, gag, drag yourself backward against the wall. He watches with mild amusement, like someone tossing a bone to a dog, not out of kindness, but curiosity. Then he leaves. No words. No explanation. The torchlight fades, and you are left alone again with the corpse of a rat and the rising question, was that meant to be food? You do not eat it. But you think about it for hours, maybe days. You imagine how you do it, break it apart with the sharp edge of your chain. Burn the fur if you could. Chew slowly. Avoid the belly. You imagine the taste. Try to remember what meat was like. In the end, you do not touch it. Not because of pride, but because you fear it will make you sicker than you already are. And, there are worse things than hunger. Later, he returns. This time he brings water. He doesn't mention the rat. You don't ask. You drink in silence. He watches you. You want to ask him why? Why that? Why now? But your voice catches in your throat. You haven't spoken in too long. Words feel foreign. In historical records, there were jailers known for these quiet games. In Avignon, one man was infamous for feeding different prisoners on alternating days, watching to see which would beg and which would break. In Germany, a warden was caught slipping dead birds into cells and documenting how long it took each man to eat. These weren't punishments. They were amusements. Control disguised as routine. Cruelty wearing the mask of order. You begin to wonder if you're part of some private experiment. If your reactions are being recorded somewhere, written in a book only the jailer sees. You imagine a page with your name and a list of entries. Day 7, refused to speak. Day 10, ate mold. Day 12, smiled at nothing. Day 14, still not broken. You hate the thought of being studied, but you also cling to it because it means someone is paying attention. You start to perform. You sit straighter when he enters. You make your voice louder. You answer his questions even when there aren't any. You pretend strength. You want to show him that he hasn't won, that you are still in control of something, your posture, your tone, your breath. But the performance doesn't last. Your body betrays you. You cough more often now. A sharp, hollow sound that rattles your chest. Your throat is raw. You hide it at first. But he notices. One day he brings a small cloth. Not clean, not fresh, just a rag. He tosses it toward you. Same as the rat. You catch it. You hold it close. You use it to cover your mouth when the coughing comes. You don't say thank you. He never brings another. You begin to forget what his face looks like. You remember the boots, the torchlight, the way he leans against the doorway. But his face slips. You try to picture it when you sleep, and your mind replaces it with someone else's. Sometimes your father, sometimes no one at all. You start to imagine what he dreams about. Does he sleep soundly? Does he dream of your cell, of the others? Or does he dream of fields, rivers, family? You want to believe he feels guilt. But you know better. The dungeon allows no guilt, only habits. He does not serve a master, he serves a machine, and you are one of its parts. Chapter 10 Disease has no mercy. Your breath sounds different now. You've started to notice the rattle at the end of each exhale. A wet, dragging note, faint but unmistakable. It started days ago, though you don't know how many. At first, it was only in the morning, when you woke curled against the wall, the chill heavy in your chest. Now it's always there. A constant whisper of something festering inside you. Your skin itches in new ways. Not from lice or damp cloth, but from within. There's a tightness across your back and shoulders. A strange heat beneath the skin that no shiver relieves. You scratch until you bleed, but there's no relief. Just raised welts and the metallic smell of your own blood rising under your fingernails. A few places have begun to ooze. You press your sleeve against them to soak the fluid. You hope it isn't serious. But you know it is. Disease in the dungeon isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive in waves of coughing and collapse like a plague in the streets. It comes in layers, quiet infections, slow decay, little deaths. A scratch that festers. A rash that spreads. A fever that takes root without fire. Your body begins to rot before your mind understands what's happening. You remember your hands, once strong, once sure. Now they tremble. The fingertips have turned pale, the nails yellowed. You drop things when you try to grip them. The crust of bread, the chipped cup both have fallen more than once. The jailer never reacts. He watches as you fumble, then walks away. You suspect he sees this as a phase. The beginning of the end? In the 15th century, a physician who briefly worked in a prison in Bologna recorded that most inmates did not die from torture, starvation, but from the slow, wet death, as he called it. Sores that never closed, teeth that fell out, skin that peeled, fevers that came in the night and left behind nothing but shaking limbs and silence. You notice a new sore on your leg. It's round, red, angry looking. It wasn't there yesterday, or maybe it was. The skin around it is tight, shiny, pulsing with heat. You touch it gently, then recoil. Pain sharp, immediate. You tear a strip of cloth from your shirt, damp it with the water from the bucket, and tie it around the sore. You hope this will help. But deep down, it won't. There are no doctors here, no poultices, no herbs. You have heard of prisoners being treated when their conditions became contagious, but not out of mercy. Only to stop it from spreading to the guards. You are not a patient. You are a problem to be managed. You cough again, deeper this time. The sound echoes in the cell. You check your sleeve and find blood. Just a speck. But enough to confirm what your body already knows. Your mouth tastes different now. Everything you eat when you eat feels like ash. Even the water leaves a bitter film on your tongue. You suspect it's the fever or something in your gums. They bleed when you chew. Your teeth feel loose. You remember stories of scurvy among sailors, how they bled from the mouth and lost their teeth from lack of greens. You never thought the same could happen in a dungeon, but now you understand. There are no vegetables here. No citrus. Only moldy bread and water that may or may not have passed through a corpse above you. The jailer brings nothing today. You wonder if he's keeping distance now? If he's noticed the change in your breathing? If he's already decided that you're too sick to feed? Somewhere down the corridor, someone else is coughing. Louder than you? Violent. Like their lungs are tearing apart. You listen. The sound continues for nearly a minute, then stops. You wait. It does not return. You wonder if that means they're getting better or worse. You lay back against the wall, feeling the chill press into your spine. You close your eyes and try to measure the fever. You press your palm to your forehead, then your neck. Both feel the same clammy, tight, hollow. You wish for a mirror, even a broken one, to see your reflection, but maybe it's better not to know. In an old French text, a monk wrote of visiting prisoners near death. He said the eyes were always the first to change. Not from blindness, but from distance. The sick begin to look past the walls, he wrote, as if they see something waiting just beyond the stone. You think about that. You try to focus on the wall in front of you. You stare at it. You whisper to it. But this time, it doesn't feel like it's listening. It feels like it's watching. Quietly, patiently, waiting. You wake coughing again, but this time you don't stop. It comes in waves, shallow, rattling gasps that leave you bent forward, clutching your middle, choking on the thin air that has turned to smoke inside your lungs. You gasp, spit, lean against the wall. Something wet trails from your lips. You wipe it and see the red. It no longer surprises you. You lean back and rest your head against the stone, trying to catch your breath. Your eyes sting. Your nose runs. You wipe both with your sleeve, leaving a dark smear behind. The cloth reeks, sweat, blood, rot. You can't remember the last time you changed. You can't remember the last time you stood upright for more than a minute. Your fingers tremble as you pull the ragged blanket over your legs. You don't know if it helps. Cold doesn't feel like cold anymore. It's just part of you now, fused into your bones like a chain around your wrist. You shift your weight and feel the blister on your side break open. You hiss and freeze. The pain spreads, slow and hot. In medieval dungeons, infection was more certain than hoping. Wounds never healed. Cuts from shackles, bites from rats, burns from torches, each became a doorway. A way for sickness to crawl beneath the skin. There were no antibiotics, no antiseptics, no clean bandages. If you lived long enough, your own body would betray you. You start to notice a smell, not from the walls, not from the floor. From you, it's sour, thick, metallic. You've smelled it before on other prisoners, passing in the corridor, dragged into the torture room. It's the smell of rot, of dying flesh. You pull the blanket tighter and close your eyes. You try to recall what your skin once felt like, firm, warm, clean. Now, it flakes and patches. Bruises bloom without reason. One leg tingles constantly, as if the blood beneath it has forgotten how to flow. When you press your fingers against your calf, the dent stays. Your veins feel sluggish, like cold molasses moving through frostbitten pipes. You whisper names again. The names of saints, healers. You don't ask for miracles. Just time. Just a little more time. You promise nothing. You offer nothing. You simply plead because that's all you have left. Somewhere above you hear footsteps. Different from the jailer. Lighter. More hurried. You listen intently. They pass. Fade. Nothing changes. You remember hearing stories of prisoners who were pulled from their cells just before death, not for mercy, but so their corpses wouldn't stink up the lower halls. Some were dumped into pits, nameless and unblessed. Others were buried inside the walls, packed in behind stones like bricks. A few, it said, were simply sealed in and forgotten. Years later, when renovations were made, bones were found curled in corners with shackles still attached. You wonder if the jailer will come, if he'll notice. If he'll care. You cough again. This one brings more blood. It runs down your chin. You don't wipe it this time. You let it sit, crust and crack. You're too tired. Your body is a furnace of contradictions, sweating but cold, burning but numb. You begin to believe the fever has taken root, deep beyond your reach. You try to drink water, but it stings. Your throat is raw. The water tastes strange now, like metal and mildew. You take only 2 sips before setting the cup down and pulling your knees in. Every motion hurts. Every motion takes thought. You sleep, but it isn't rest. Your dreams are twisted now. You see your own hands reaching out of the stone. You see your tongue fall from your mouth, crawling like a worm toward the cell door. You wake with a gasp, mouth open, heart racing. It takes a full minute before you realize it was a dream. The air feels heavier than it did this morning. You can't tell if it's real or if your lungs are just failing. You lie still, counting each breath, afraid one might be your last. Then you stop counting, because the numbers are wrong. You've lost the ability to follow them. Your vision blurs at the edges. You blink and see double. You hold your hand out in front of your face and watch it shimmer like heat above fire. You know what this means. You've seen it before at others. The last stage. The mind separating itself from the body, a final kindness. You close your eyes and whisper again, this time not to the stone, not to the saints, but to yourself. I'm still here, and the voice that answers, it's your own. But just barely. Chapter 11, no trial, no exit. You once believed there would be a trial. That belief lived in you long after the beatings began, after the first chain, after the silence. It was your thread to the world beyond the stone, a quiet voice that said, this is temporary. You repeated it like a mantra. The law would catch up. Someone would speak. Your name would be cleared. That voice has gone quiet now. No one has come. Not a priest, not a clerk, not a judge. No parchment has arrived bearing your name. No footsteps have brought news. No whisper has carried your sentence. You begin to suspect there is no sentence at all. You were not convicted. You were removed. It's a truth you wrestled with at first, but now accept. This place isn't built for judgment. It's built for forgetting. You think back to the moment you were taken, the shouts, the cuffs, the confusion. You never saw a warrant. You never heard a charge. They simply came. And you disappeared. In medieval Europe, justice often moved without urgency. Trials were delayed not by case volume or paperwork, but by power, by laziness, or by malice. Some prisoners were left in dungeons for months awaiting a trial that never arrived. Some were forgotten entirely. Others remained locked beneath castles long after their accusers had died or fled. Their names outlived their purpose. You begin to suspect your name has outlived you. There are no records in this place, no announcements, no calendars. Even your jailer never says your name. You begin to doubt he knows it. Or if he ever did, you once tried to ask. You asked for a trial. For a letter. For anything. The jailer stared at you. Not with cruelty, just vacancy. Then you walked away. That was the last time you asked. You remember reading once about a man who was imprisoned for debt and never released, even after it had been paid. The document confirming his release was lost. The official who had signed it retired. The man died in his cell. Years later, someone found the paper folded between two books. It bore his name. It meant nothing. That story returns now, not as a curiosity, but as a prophecy. You shift against the wall and feel your ribs grind together. Your breathing has steadied for now, but your body is wasting. You know it? The skin on your legs is bruised in places you haven't touched. You see lines around your ankles where the swelling is pressed against your bones. You are shrinking into yourself, and still no trial. The dungeon has taught you that justice is not a sword. It is a door, and for you it never opened. You think of all the others. The prisoners you've heard cry or whisper or die in the dark around you. Did they have trials? Did they have crimes? Or were they simply removed like you snatched from the world for reasons that didn't require explanation? You imagine one of them was a thief, one a debtor, one perhaps an innocent man who looked too long at the wrong lord's wife. And here you all are equal now. Not by guilt, but by silence. Somewhere in the upper corridors of this castle, there are scrolls, names, accusations. You wonder if yours is among them. If your name is fading in ink, or if it was never written at all. Perhaps you were detained by word of mouth, a nod, a whisper, a favor called in. You once thought your reputation might protect you, but reputation does not echo underground. You try again to recall the moment they arrested you. You remember the room, the sunlight, the voices. You remember asking why, but you do not remember the answer. If there was one, it has faded. If there wasn't, that would make more sense now. You whisper your name aloud. It feels dry in your mouth. Hollow, like a lie. You say it again, then stop. The sound startles you. It sounds like someone else. You begin to fear not execution, but permanence. That your story will not end in a noose or an axe or even a burial. That it will simply stop. That one day you will sleep and not wake. The rats will come. The bucket will tip. The door will remain closed. And someone else, months from now, will be thrown into your cell and see only your bones in the corner. You will not be remembered. You will not be buried. You will not be missed. And still no trial. You don't remember how long ago it was that you stopped expecting footsteps. In the beginning, every echo was a question. Every pause in the corridor was hope. Even the jailer, cruel as he was, became a symbol of contact. You listened for the jingle of his keys. You imagined he might say something, anything, a date, a name, a decision. But the longer you waited, the more those sounds lost meaning. And then you stopped listening at all. Now the silence doesn't hurt. It simply is. Like the weight of the walls or the cold in your joints. It no longer feels like the absence of something. It has become its own presence. A kind of reality. One that no longer carries the shape of courtrooms or arguments or scribes scratching ink across parchment. That world feels mythical now. As distant as fire-breathing beasts or lands across the sea. In some parts of medieval Europe, prisoners were kept indefinitely not because they were dangerous, but because releasing them required effort. It required someone to sign something, to remember something. But memory fades quickly when the person rotting behind the door has no power. And when those in charge are replaced, the prisoner's file may never be passed on. One scribe leaves, another forgets. A paper slips between a wall and a desk and becomes dust. You wonder now if your jailer even knows why you're here. You suspect he doesn't. Maybe he once did. Maybe he was told this one's not to be released, and that was enough. No names. No crimes, just a sentence passed not by court, but by convenience. The bucket beside you is full again. You pushed it toward the bars this morning. If it was morning, hoping someone would take it away, no one has. The smell spreads through the cell, mingling with the scent of your body, the damp walls, the rot in your wounds. You've grown used to it. You stopped holding your breath days ago. Your body adjusts to what would once have made you retch. You sit against the wall, watching a spider inch along the ceiling. You follow its path with care, as if it were writing something you're meant to understand. It vanishes into a crack. You wait for it to return. It doesn't. The walls feel closer now, not physically, but spiritually. You lean into them when you sleep. You press your forehead against them when the fever comes. You speak into their cracks, not expecting answers, but out of habit. You tell them things used to write in letters, thoughts you would have once whispered to a friend or lover. You don't know if you still have either, or if you ever did. You begin to question whether the world outside still exists. You imagine the sun burning the sky, and it feels too bright to be real. You think about rain hitting roof tiles and find yourself wondering what it would sound like. You picture the flicker of firelight in a home, your home, but the walls and the memory are wrong. You see a face, but it has no name. You hear a laugh, but not the voice behind it. These aren't memories anymore. They're decorations. Ghosts of a life that belonged to someone else. You stop talking to the jailer when he visits. There's no point. He doesn't reply. You once asked, "Will I ever be tried?" His only response was to toss a piece of stale bread toward your feet and leave. That was weeks ago, or months. You stopped marking time when the stone you used wore smooth. You once scratched tally marks into the wall. One for each day. You filled a patch, then another. Then you ran out of space. You started over, then lost count. Eventually you looked at the markings and no longer knew which were yours. Someone had been here before, maybe several. Their marks mingled with yours. One set ended suddenly 10 tallies, then nothing. Another was carved so deep, the stone cracked beneath it. You place your hand over that one sometimes. The deep one. It feels like something sacred, like a final prayer, or a warning, somewhere far above you. You think you hear a bell, a real bell, maybe from a chapel. You close your eyes and listen. It fades too quickly. Perhaps it was real, perhaps it was your mind. It doesn't matter. Even if it rang for you, it would take more than sound to dig you out of this place. You lay back, staring into the darkness, and ask yourself the question you've come to fear most. What if no one is coming? What if no one ever was? You breathe slowly, counting each inhale as if it were a verdict. One breath for guilt, one for innocence, one for the sentence that never arrived. You speak your name again, quieter than before. But this time, it doesn't feel like yours. Chapter 12, The Inquisition arrives. You first hear the difference in their footsteps. not the plodding rhythm of a bored jailer or the echoing stomp of a soldier's boot. These men walk with care, with purpose, with silence that still manages to make noise. Soft leather shoes on old stone. Measured, exact. When they pass your cell, they do not pause. They do not peer in. They already know who's inside. Later, the jailer returns. He doesn't speak. He just looks at you for a moment, longer than usual. Then he opens the door and steps aside. You're not dragged this time. You're told to walk. He gestures, so you obey. Your legs shake beneath you. Your knees lock. Your shoulders hunch. You do not ask where you're going. You've learned not to ask. The corridor is colder than your cell. You hadn't thought that possible, but this cold is different. It's not physical. It's in the walls, the floor, the air between you and whatever lies ahead. You follow the jailer in silence. He doesn't look back. They're waiting in a room you've never seen before. It's not large. There's a single table, a few wooden stools, a candle on a stand. 2 men sit behind the table. Their robes are plain gray, undyed wool, but clean. Their faces are clean too, shaved, their eyes steady. There are no weapons on the table, no shackles, no visible tools, just parchment, ink, and silence. They gesture for you to sit. You lower yourself slowly, every joint protesting. The stool is hard and cold. Your body aches, but you don't shift. You don't want to seem impatient. You wait. One of the men opens a book. The other folds his hands. When they speak, their voices are calm, polite. They ask for your name. You give it. They nod, though you're not sure they write it down. Then come the questions. Not about your health, or your cell, or what crime brought you here. They ask about your beliefs, about your thoughts, about what you've seen, heard, read. They ask about your neighbors, your friends, your loyalties, your dreams. The questions are gentle, but each one digs. You hesitate on one answer. The second man leans forward slightly. He smiles. Take your time, he says, but be sure. You try to remember what you said yesterday, or last week, or in the cell when you thought no one could hear. You wonder if this is the test. Not your answers, but your consistency, your tone, your eyes. Inquisition was never about shouting. That came later. If it came at all, the true terror lay in politeness. The slow pressure. The awareness that everything you said was already known, or soon would be. The scribes didn't need you to speak to convict you. They needed you to speak to trap yourself. The questions keep coming. Some repeat, slightly altered. You answer again and you try to keep your story straight. You try to remember which parts were true, which parts you imagined. You begin to doubt your own memories. You hesitate. They write. One of them reads a passage aloud from a book you once owned. A banned text. You're sure you never spoke of it here. Not to the jailer, not to the stones, but they know. You swallow hard. They smile again. You ask if you are to be tried, if this is your trial. They say no. This is inquiry. The trial may come later, or not at all. That depends on what you say and what you remember, and what you forget. You begin to understand the weight of every word. In the medieval inquisitions, silence could be dangerous. But speaking could be worse. Some prisoners were convicted for not confessing. Others were convicted for confessing too easily. The goal was not truth. It was control, submission, the bending of thought to match expectation. They ask about a name you don't know. You say you've never met them. They nod. Then they show you a parchment with your name beside theirs. You blink. You stammer. They close the book. The questions stop. You're told to stand. Your legs barely obey. You wobble, your head spinning. The candlelight feels too bright. The room seems to shrink. The jailer appears again. He doesn't look at you. As you're led back down the corridor, you feel something different. Not pain, not relief, but fear, because now you know you are not forgotten. You are being watched. Back in your cell, nothing has changed. The bucket is still where you left it. The wall still weeps moisture. The blanket lies crumpled in the corner, untouched. But something is different. Not in the stone, in you. You sit down slowly, back against the cold wall, and close your eyes. You try to piece together the conversation, every word, every shift in tone. Did they trap you? Did you contradict yourself? Did you reveal something? Or did you say too little? You can't tell. And that you realize is the genius of it. Their questions weren't about guilt. They were about ownership. The moment you answered, you gave them power. And now they hold pieces of you truths, half-truths, gouts. They will arrange them how they wish. That night you sleep badly. Dreams twist around words spoken in the chamber. Questions echo. A candle flickers where there is no candle. One of the men smiles again and again, but his eyes are empty. You wake sweating, coughing, throat dry. The shadows in the cell seem sharper. The jailer arrives the next day. He doesn't speak, but you see the difference. He doesn't throw the bread. He places it gently on the floor. He sets down a cup with 2 hands. Then he leaves without looking back. A courtesy you never received before. It frightens you more than any slap or scream ever could. You eat the bread in silence, not out of hunger, but to keep the ritual, to keep something familiar. You sip the water carefully, tasting it for any change. It seems the same. Still, you hesitate between each swallow. You no longer trust anything given without force. By the 3rd day, they summon you again. No explanation. No warning. Just the jailer's shadow in the doorway and nod. Your legs are weaker. Your fever lingers. But you go. This time, there is only one man at the table. The younger one. He gestures for you to sit. You obey. He begins not with questions, but with a story about another prisoner. A man who confessed fully, eagerly, who listed every name, every gathering, every phrase he ever spoke that might sound like defiance. The man was released within a month, given bread, wine, even a job in a far-off town. You listen carefully, every detail sharp. Then the inquisitor folds his hands and looks at you. You have been cooperative, he says. But there is more you remember. You open your mouth, then stop. Because something about the story is wrong. You've heard versions of it before. In the market, in whispers, in songs. A released heretic. A second chance. But each version ended the same way, with the man vanishing, or dying mysteriously, or returning to the dungeon with no eyes. You nod but say nothing. He slides a parchment across the table. A confession. Blank. Except for your name at the top. Your handwriting is expected below. He offers ink. A quill. A chair more comfortable than the one you're on. You do not have to write everything, he says. Just enough. You stare at the parchment, the quill, the black pool of ink waiting to carry your guilt. You feel a deep stillness inside you. Not resistance, not courage, just fatigue. If you write, it ends. If you don't, it may still end, but slower, more painfully. You've seen both paths. Neither leads to sunlight. You whisper a question. If I write, do I go free? He smiles soft and practiced. If your words are honest, yes. You nod, then lower your eyes. But you do not write. You are led back again. That night, your cell feels smaller. Not physically, but like the air has thickened. You think of others who signed, who trusted. You wonder what happened to them. You imagine the walls opening to receive their secrets, one name at a time, until nothing human was left behind their words. You press your hand to the stone again. It does not warm. The next day, no one comes, nor the next. You wait. Dread grows. Not of pain or even death, but of decisions being made in silence. Of verdicts signed while you sleep. You know what true fear is. It isn't the rack. It isn't the lash. It's being remembered just enough to be destroyed properly. You begin to whisper aloud to yourself, recite facts, repeat your memories. Not because anyone listens, but because you fear forgetting them. You fear waking one day and not remembering your name. Your cell, even your crime, false as it may be. You're not even sure if you were accused of heresy. Maybe you just knew someone maybe you stood near the wrong bookseller. Maybe someone spoke your name in a room above ground, and it was written down by the wrong scribe. In the end, it doesn't matter. You are no longer a prisoner. You are a suspect. And that, in the eyes of the Inquisition, is all it takes. Thank you for drifting through history with us. If you enjoyed this quiet journey into the past, Gently tap subscribe and let the drowsy historian be your guide whenever sleep feels far away. Until next time, rest well, dream deeper, and remember, history is never in a hurry.